Hi everyone, my name is Shona and thank you for joining me today as I run through my November setup. I always like to start each session by lighting a candle to get me in a nice relaxed mindset. In this video I'm going to show you my minimalist monthly setup for my bullet journal. The first page I'm going to start with is my November monthly setup, and this page is actually going to be a Dutch door. The first thing I like to do is start by writing the word November. I'll then go back over all of my downward strokes, adding an extra line and then colouring in the gaps. You would usually see this done for faux calligraphy fonts, but I guess you could say this is like a faux Broadway font. I like to draw out my spreads in pencil first. That allows me to get my spacing correct, and it means if I make any mistakes they're easy to rub out. For the Dutch door, I use this book of patterned paper that I got from the dollar store. I kind of use this as a cop-out instead of having to draw or paint anything in my spreads. I do have a video for how I created this Dutch door, which I'll link down below. This month I used a cloud as my Dutch door theme because it represents all of the rain that we're due to get in Vancouver this month. This next page is where I like to mark all of my big tasks for the month. I also add to this as the month goes on. I like to mark tasks with a bullet point, events with an open circle, and my notes with a dash. This method of journaling is from the writer Carl method of bullet journaling. Next, moving down to the bottom right hand corner, this is where I like to add a little calendar for the month. When I have the Dutch door closed, I can see this calendar and it's a nice reference point when I mark out my tasks for the month. As you can see, when I close the Dutch door, you can see the calendar in the bottom right hand corner. As I previously said, I use this top part to write down my tasks or any events that I have coming up this month. I use this bottom left hand section for anything I need to note for next month's bullet journal. I like to use these skeleton binder clips to hold my pages down, that way they don't crinkle underneath my hand as I move from one side of the page to the other. I think it's important to note that you should just use the equipment that you have available to you. I'm currently using these Sakura Micron pens. I had used 3 other different types of pens before I finally decided to splash out on these ones. I'll link all of the supplies that I used in this video down in the description below. This is my calendar page. I like to start this page with a quote on top. The quote I've chosen for this month says, "Making mistakes is better than faking perfection." I like to write my quote in a highlighter and a pen. I write with the highlighter first and then go over it with pen to avoid smudging if doing it the other way around. This month I'm using a blue highlighter to match with my cloudy rainy theme. Underneath this is my calendar. I like to leave one box between each row and each column. I like having white space in my journal. I like to space out some of my spreads in order to make them look less cluttered. In the bottom right hand corner I draw a box to add a photo of the month. I got the idea to add this to my spreads from another channel called Elsa Ray and Baron. This is something I used to do in my travel diary that I kept while backpacking around Southeast Asia in 2019. I think photographs are such a nice way to look back over a certain period of time. I use a HP sprocket to print my photos, and I'll put a link to this in the description below. I use the space in the bottom left to record any upcoming events. I will highlight the box with the relevant date up in the calendar, write the date down in the bottom left, and then write the event beside it. I use a ruler to double line my headings on each page. I know some people are capable of drawing lines without a ruler, but I, unfortunately, am not one of those. Also, I don't think the perfectionist in me would be able to cope without the ruler. Using things like lines can help lift your minimalist bullet journal. Remember, minimalist doesn't mean boring. I'd love to know what style of bullet journaling is your favourite. If you do have a favourite, please let me know in the comments down below. Next to my calendar page, I have my mood tracker. This is something I've only recently added to my monthly spreads. For this page, I'll use an object associated with my monthly design. And I'm sure you've guessed by now that it's going to be a cloud. Down on the bottom, I'll draw out a key with the numbers 1 to 5. In these boxes, I'll either colour code them or code them with a pattern to correspond to each number. Next, I'm going to draw 30 clouds to correspond to the 30 days of November. The idea is that at the end of each day, I'll colour in the cloud with the colour corresponding to the number that best reflected my mood. At the end of the month, this is a nice quick way to look back over how my mood was in general over the month. So now, sit back, relax and enjoy this masterpiece of cloud drawing. Unfortunately, the masterpiece is cut short because my camera died, but here you can see what it looks like completed. I like to use my bullet journal to help me build and track some habits. I hope that as you watch this video, you might also pick up some new tricks and tips to help you with your habits. This next page is my habit tracker page. Again, I'll write my title on the top, and I like to use 2 boxes for my title. I feel like this makes it stand out a little bit more from the rest of the page. And again, I'll use my ruler to double line it. I track 8 habits every month, and I like to give them their each individual box. These boxes are 7 squares across for the 7 days of the week, and for this month they're 5 boxes high. I like to write my dates to the corresponding day of the week. I know this is not the case for everybody who uses a habit tracker, but I just prefer the look of this. Some people will also cut off the start and the end of this box just so that there's no empty space or room for confusion. Again, this is totally a personal preference, and this is the way I like to do mine. It's important to remember that you should do what works for you in your bullet journal. Your journal should match your taste and your needs. Don't compare your journal directly to somebody else's, because what works for them might not necessarily work for you. The 8 things that I like to track are working out, getting outside for a walk, doing some yoga or some stretching, reaching a step target of 10,000 steps, completing my skincare routine, cupping therapy, practicing a new skill or task, and finally giving up some sort of bad habit or bad food. Some of the things that were recently on my practice list include learning some Spanish with Duolingo and watching YouTube videos on how to create YouTube tutorials. And on the list for giving up recently were bread and coffee. Don't worry, I didn't do them both in the same week. I find these practice and give up tasks help me to build good habits whilst also trying to break some of the bad habits I have. This next page is my memories page, and I've had this in my diary since I began journaling. At the end of each day before I go to bed, I like to write down something good or bad that's happened that day. This is a nice way to remember those small moments in life that sometimes get forgotten. I write all the dates of the month down the left hand side and use one line to write my memories for each day. Next up is a page I use to track my water and fluid intakes. I hope I'm not alone in being a disaster when it comes to keeping track of how much water I drink every day. And let's face it, drinking water isn't something we should be forgetting to do. I mean, not to be dramatic, but you could literally die. I use a bar chart to track mine. I write all the days of the month down the bottom and then write my milliliters along the side. I track my millimeters in increments of 250 mils. I don't only track my water, but I also track any other fluids I drink every day. This lets me see if my fluid intake is very unbalanced, and it helps me see when I need to pick up the slack for the following day. If it's been a tough day of coffees and wine, then I know tomorrow I really have to up my game and just stick to water. This is another place in my diary I like to use different colours to record different things. But if you don't have different coloured pens or markers, you can always just create a pattern with the one pen or pencil you do have. I find colour coding things makes it so much easier to look at them at a glance. The liquids I track are warm water with lemon and ginger, tea, coffee, alcohol, fizzy drinks, or soda or pop as they like to say over this side of the world. And then I have an others category for everything else. Oh, and water. Let's not forget the water. As you can see on this next pink one, I also added a pattern to the marker. This next part is something that I purposely left into the edit to show that it's okay to make mistakes in your diary. I like to use the Rolly Tipp-Ex instead of the pen one because I feel like it gives a smoother finish on the page. So it looks like I actually forgot to add other to my key, but it's just another blue square and I draw a pattern on top of it. Next up is probably my favourite page in my whole diary. It's my shopping list page. I'm a disaster when it comes to being in the supermarket and trying to remember the ingredients that I said last week that I was running low on. So now when I'm cooking and I realise that something's about to run out, I can just grab my diary and write the item on my list. Then just before I leave for the shop, I can open my diary, look at the list and take a photo on my phone. That way I'm not carrying a clunky diary around with me or trying to rack my brain while I'm standing in the middle of the store looking at packed shelves. I'm sure we've all been there, standing in the middle of the shop, staring at all these packed shelves, hoping that something jogs your memory. In the end, you decide it must have been mayonnaise, only to come home and discover you've already got 7 jars in the fridge. So, that's why I keep my shopping list. I then decided to add 3 more categories. A things for the house section, a things for me section, the most important one, and a gift section. It's the same idea with these. When you're out and about, you can just refer to the picture on your phone and you know what you need. I also find it really useful to have a place to write down all these things. As soon as they pop into my head, I can just write them down, and then when I forget them, it's no big deal. When I'm drawing these boxes, I like to use my small ruler because the edge of it is nice and curved. So instead of having sharp corners, I can have these nice rounded curved ones. Again, it's another way to spice up your minimalist journal. And although these markers dry quick, sometimes they just don't dry quick enough, and I end up smudging them with the ruler as I move from one line to another. I like to get my Tipp-Ex back out for this, or whiteout as it's known over here, just to fix up any of those smudges on the page. If you've made a big mistake on one of your pages and you don't want to Tipp-Ex over it, or you just don't have the patience, you can go to a back page in your journal, cut it out and stick it over your mistake. And finally, my last spread is my weekly spread. For this, I like to split my page into 6 columns lengthwise. The final column I'll split into 2 across for my weekend days. I've tried a couple of different methods for my weekly layout and this is my favourite one. This is definitely a trial and error part of the journal and just see what works for you or what you like the look of best. Depending on what you want to track here or how busy your schedule is, you might need more space than just a 2-page spread for a week. Similarly, you may have very little to track and you might just want 1 page per week. You can split your page across the middle completely and draw some bigger boxes for each day. If you're using that method, you could also use 8 boxes as opposed to 6. You can have an extra box for something like notes or events, or you could add your habit tracker or water tracker in here. I keep mine simple with just the day and date across the top. And that takes us to the end of my journal. If you enjoyed this video, then please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and give me a little like below. Thanks so much for joining me today. Sláinte.